Hi, Andy. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
No, not yet. Can you see if the booth can come see how to?
How about now? Anything?
We can hear you on my computer. We're trying to have it come through the speakers. You want me to unplug and plug?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great.
Test, test.
Test, test, test.
Okay. Can we hit this? Let's try that, and then we'll go back if we have.
Test, test, test.
Test, test, test.
Okay, let's switch back.
One more, Andy.
Test, test, test. Testing.
Okay. Yeah, it's Michael here real quick.
Okay.
You're good on that.
All right. We can hear you, Andy. It's just not coming from the bigger speakers we tested yesterday. So.
Okay. Well, do I need to just talk really loud?
Not yet. Give us 1 minute.
All right.
We're quite at 8 o'clock yet.
All right. We're good.
So as we're working on this, the other thing I would ask is when we do start making comments, if you just, I know you all know each other, but if you wouldn't mind saying your name, just because I am recording it and it may not pick up who's who, and just so Andy and you can know who's speaking. That'd be really appreciated.
Ian, can I ask you a question? Do you have a date to go to council?
No, okay, no.
So let me check the speaker settings on your laptop. Okay, and we're on Sync Master.
You are on Sync Master?
Yes.
Oh. And it's not coming through the TV at all? That doesn't...
No. Just did the volume higher.
Who is saying that? Is she saying that, or are you experiencing that?
Well, we're experiencing that here. The members on Zoom are just coming through the speakers of her laptop. Okay. From the TV. Okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry about that, people.
No, you please go ahead. So just so you know who all is here, I think most of you know who I
Okay.
am or have heard of me at some point, even just through email. I'm Ann Loren, I'm the Public Works Director. I was started with the county back
Okay.
in 2008. I was actually the capital projects.
Reconnected. The laptop.
I was not engaged in this project, and Ilo Shelton, who interviewed police officer presentations he had made on this.
Okay,
and
thank
so
you.
he's now the utility manager. So if you didn't know, that's our history on this. And then Corey, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Sorry, we're not meeting under better circumstances. I'm Corey Starr. I'm the new Community Services Director. I came here in October and have a number of years of working in the Parks Recreation side of the house. So thank you for coming this morning.
So in the back, I'll do introductions, but feel free to say something if you'd like to say. Louise Romero, she's the office manager from Public Works and the backbone of all of our everything. hoping she helps set this up, and also she's going to be taking some notes. We are also recording, just for anyone who wants to go back and take a look at it, just for just because what we do now, we can post these recordings and things. We have much more technology than we had back in the day, and it did make me think back to when this project first was conceived back. Well, I know golf course improvements have been needed for many, many years, but I was here back in the late 2000, 2010, almost, when it was the first time that the county opened up a pretty significant CIP process and said, we've got this capital money we haven't had before. How, community, how do we want to spend it? It's a very robust process of application process, investigation process. There's actually a joint staff citizen committee that made recommendations to council, and this project was one of those. And I know a lot of you were involved, and then it wasn't until probably the 2017, 2018, where the actual funding of a project and was put into our budget of saying the county's going to spend this much investment for these things at the golf course. And so that's how long this project's been talked about. It's been, and then of course we had certain priorities for this project, and so staff's been working, as you know, on the irrigation portion of it. There was kind of a chunk of money that and it was split up to prioritize the irrigation first, and then this is kind of we're taking the remainder of money and trying to make the most of it with other improvements we know are needed. But we also know it's not going to go and take care of everything that we wish we could do with the golf course. I wouldn't be keeping going, but I want to give the technology a chance to go, so I'm going to say a few more words. So that's kind of where we are. We're good.
You should be.
Andy, you want to give it one more test?
Testing, testing, testing.
Yay. Okay.
All
right.
right.
Thank you for that. So quickly, introductions. Eric Martinez, he's our county engineer. Leslie Buckland, she's our I don't know what your title exactly is.
Well, I'm a communications and public relations.
Yeah.
Public information officer.
Her and Julie do all the PIO, wonderfully talented and artists. Diane and Marquez and Rose, Parks, Recreation, Open Space Manager. And Wayne Cole snuck in. And we've got on the phone project manager and longtime resident, and Anthony Strain, also project manager, longtime resident. I think you know him as well. So with that, I'm going to share screen, Andy, unless you want to say a few words before before I share the slides.
No, are you going to share the presentation or should I try? Because I think I've got a pretty good internet connection right now.
Okay, I'll go ahead and allow you to share.
All right.
And Andy, I was explaining to everybody earlier, I am going to ask you to try to keep it as brief as possible, just because we do want to give as much time. We have a pretty full house here. I want to give time to let people make their comments and ask questions.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. All right, let me
16, 17, still 20 maybe.
share this. Sorry, taking a little bit of time. 1 second. Okay, do you see a start of a presentation?
We do.
Do you see full screen?
Not yet. There we go.
All right, are you seeing a title slide of a golf course improvements discussion?
Good, Andy.
Okay, so take it away.
Please.
All right, so yeah, all right. So, well, great to meet you all. My name is Andy Staples. I'm actually calling in from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'm here for the next week. So my apologies in advance if for some reason my internet connection goes away and you've got other slides in case as a backup. But I'm a golf course architect. I actually live in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been working at Los Alamos for a number of years. Actually, I was the first one hired way back when, maybe whatever, 7, 8 years ago, to do the first round of improvements. We did a very robust master plan at that time. I don't know if I've met any of you then, but somewhat familiar with the golf course. So this was great to be asked back over this project. So it's great to see that the county is continuing to put money in the golf course, because I know it's of very much needed for everybody, especially you golfers. So appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Just real quick summary. So I'm a golf architect in the business now for almost 30 years. I go around the country talking quite a bit about municipal golf. I have a database of, I believe, just about every golf course that's owned either by a county or a city in the country. I have a quarterly conversation with a newsletter, with a newsletter to all these stakeholders, very aware of what's happening in the industry, not only just from a municipal standpoint, but golf in general. I'm proud of the plans that we put together. It's been a really nice back and forth with county and staff. So I'll do my best to give you some of the rundown of what we did. Anybody who saw the presentation for Parks and Rec, that's essentially the presentation I'm going to follow today. I'll give you a little bit more color, but I think that really gives us a pretty good sense of the summary and what I was contracted to do. Are you seeing the slides change still? I'm on an agenda.
Yes.
Is it taking a while? Okay. All right. Was there a little bit of a lag there? I'll make sure I give it a little time. Yeah. So today I want to go over the scope of work of what I was hired for. I want to go over the priorities that were set forth by the county on the golf course. I want to give you a brief summary of my findings, give you the direction of the plan, and then have a cost presentation. But essentially, we'll spend most of the time talking about direction of plan, I'm sure. But this is obviously where we are today, and I'm open to evolving this plan where we think is best for the users of this incredible asset. So I was contracted to implement golf course improvements. So there was an RFP sent out a number of months ago. I was selected. And so part of that golf course improvement project was to review the current course conditions and then provide best value design options, considering initial costs and life cycle costs. And I want to make sure I pay attention to this, because best value design is really what we've focused on. I'd like to believe that what you're going to hear from me today is that we've used, not only my experience in golf course architecture, but real facts, real data, science, soil science around your putting greens and things like that. We did hire an agronomist to do some work. And so part of the solution that we came up with was looking for best value based on the fact that we only had a budget of 1.9 million. Now, you guys just recently upgraded your irrigation system, which is spectacular, but that took more than half of our golf course budget. So we're left with 1.9 million. And so there again, I'm left to try to figure out, considering initial costs and long-term costs, what the best value of design are. And I think that's what we really focused on our solution.
Andy, it's Ann. I just kind of, for those of you who, back when council approved this, it was anticipated it was more like 1.2 for these improvements. The reason you're seeing 1.9 is because after we've done all the other work, we actually have we're actually ahead. We had some savings on the irrigation. So just wanted to explain why that number is different.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I was given priorities. These were stated in the RFP, and so then once we started work, we tried to kind of hone in on these, but these are listed essentially in order of priority. However, I've kind of moved some things around ultimately, but they were given to me as the safety netting and the safety of the driving range, the quality and condition of the bunkers, the condition and location of tees, cart paths, greens. There was some reference to a restoration or renovation of greens, and then upgrade of the restrooms. And what I would say here too, and this isn't my statistic, this is a statistic that's reinforced across the country, but the National Golf Foundation always places that if someone's going to come back and play a golf course, the putting greens are always number one. And so one of the things I tried to stress to the group that I was working with, that, you know, it's listed as number 5. And so one of the scopes of my work was to hone in on some testing of the greens, because even back 10 years ago when we first started, we knew that there were some issues going on with the greens, and I've got some pictures to show you what we came up with what drove our solution. But here again, let's go back to number 1 here. Safety netting was a significant priority of what we set out to do. So let's go through the summary of findings. So safety netting the range. So Mike and staff have been tracking balls going out the side of the range. Everyone understands that there's a net at the end of the range, and there's only artificial turf tees. There's really no natural grass to speak of. So, you know, from a quality of standpoint, on top of the safety issues of the driving range, we knew that here's a picture of the netting behind the range. It's got holes, it's got nets, it needs replaced. And so, you know, as a golf architect and understanding exactly how to not only limit everyone's liability, but also just increase customer satisfaction and really long-term revenue, I'm going to get into the kind of the impacts of what a new range will do for the county. There's obviously a need for improvement. Here's another picture of the net that actually, you know, tries to separate the main hitting area to the short game area, which is also a really valuable part. You have a lot of width, you just don't have a whole lot of length. Another key finding is I'm looking behind your clubhouse. You guys just, at the time that I was originally hired, we're just going through the construction of a new clubhouse. Fantastic asset. However, that interaction behind the clubhouse with the driving range is a huge possibility, a huge potential. And we see this all across the country about how this practice facility and clubhouse and food and beverage really, when done well, work hand in hand. And so here's a picture of the back of the clubhouse, which I, you know, immediately go to and say this is a really an untapped potential of how these two pieces can not only serve golfers but really serve the entire community, because this ends up being one of the ways that you reach across the aisle to get non-golfers out and actually get a golf club in their hand. All right, so here's an aerial photograph looking down over your golf course. Is everybody seeing the aerial? Is it changing pretty good? All right, yes. Cool. All right, so we do analysis, and I just go along with me here. I'm going to kind of give you some idea of spatial analysis. These plans are generally the same scale. So this is what your driving range area is. And when you hit golf balls, you know, granted, it depends upon from what point you hit and who's actually hitting. And I understand that most average golfers don't hit it 300 yards, but with the ball count at the end of the range, we're certainly seeing a number of balls leaving the area of the driving range. So what I did is I compared this to a project I did down in Hobbs, New Mexico. This is an aerial of the driving range down for Rockwind Community Links. And I'm going to put a little area on there. Now this is a double-ended range, but it's you know, very indicative to how far golf balls travel in Hobbs. And of course, you guys are at elevation, so you guys are going to actually see maybe 5 to 10% additional yardage. So if I go back to this aerial, and this was the original space for a driving range, and I put Rockwind on there, you can start to see that it actually overtakes the second and third hole. So this idea of technology and distance and the cost of netting, liability, those all weighed very heavily on this. So what did we do? We hired a consultant, Tanner Consulting, out of California. They're actually the industry's you know, preeminent, you know, basic, anybody who wants to know where golf balls are going across the country, they hire Dave Tanner. He does all the work for Top Golf. If you guys have ever seen a Top Golf facility, you see how tall those nets are along the edges of their driving range. So we had him do a ball flight study using the exact same balls that you guys use, and did a tracking based on a number of different golf clubs. And so I'll zoom in on this. I know it's hard to see, so you just have to kind of take my word for it. But in the middle of this, the highest netting was 141 feet to contain 100% of the golf balls. So therein lies the question: do we need to contain 100% of the golf balls? I suggest that we do. So now we start to articulate that what we thought was maybe a 50, 60, 80 foot high net, the data is suggesting that we now need something much more in line with 100, 120, 130, or even 140 feet. So we said, okay, let's get a quick budget for how much these things cost. So we went out to a judge netting specialist. By no means did we go out for bid for this. We just, I wanted to know exactly what these things would cost. And so when you zoom in on this cost estimate, the price worked for the steel poles is $913,000 for the 140 foot. Anything over 90 feet needs steel poles. So I said, okay, if we just want to go to 90 feet, how much would that be? It's $384,000, but that's only 90 feet tall. That's essentially leaving 40 feet or more of a void. And so I was not willing to sign off on something less than 100 feet. I don't know that we went so far as to ask the county what they were ready to sign off on, but essentially I immediately drew the conversation around, why would we want to spend this kind of money on steel poles and steel netting when this is real money that could be put back to the golf course that we know all across the golf course is needed. So then we asked the question, okay, what's the ongoing maintenance cost of netting? If we go ahead and regardless of whether it's 90 feet or 140 feet, we think it's $60,000 every 5 to 7 years. You can start to see already the nets are falling apart. They don't last forever. The wind is pretty strong. So there's, not only are we going to be paying to put up netting, we're going to have to maintain that netting. So my goal was to try to do our best to eliminate netting entirely. All right, let's shift gears. We're going into the bunkers. We know that there's a certain number of bunkers that need improvement. I look at things in terms of numbers of bunkers and total square feet. That directly relates to cost. I don't have to tell you guys that your bunkers are well past your life, useful life. However, some are worse than others. And so, but by all means, every single bunker on the course needs to be upgraded. Your teeing grounds, we reviewed all the scorecard from back to front and looked at all the quality of the tees. There's no true forward set. There's a lot of need for spacing set tees based on swing speed. Here's an example of a poor quality, poor placement. Everyone knows, especially some of the forward tees, the women in the crowd know that there's a dire need to replace a lot of the tees and put them in better locations. And so my philosophy is based on swing speed. So I actually went through and did an analysis of every hole to understand where tees should be placed. Back in the day, we didn't really use this kind of data. Now I actually use the science of a golf swing, knowing that female golfers maybe average closer to 65 miles per hour, and an average male is at 90. I can use the percentage base to understand what yardage should be. And so really, a majority of your tees need to be redesigned based on this philosophy. And it really is more indicative to just being more friendly and understanding how far people hit the golf ball. Golf cart paths all across need improvement. And then let's get to your greens. You have 20 greens, small greens, averaging 42,000 or so square feet. But here's a picture I had way back in the day when I did the first master plan. Knew that something was going on with the actual growing medium of your greens. So we tested your greens again, sent it off to a lab, Brookside Laboratory in Ohio. Fred Astrom is an agronomist that I work with, and he gave us a complete analysis, particle size, and recommended that these greens definitely needed to have something done, whether it was removing the top 3 to 4 inches or a complete rebuild. He gave us an option of how to address it. And I've been trying to push the county to understand that, just because you've been limping along all these years, you're going to have to do something with your greens. And part of our plan that we currently have come up with does something with these greens, and we start to improve some of the putting greens. And actually, My plan for going out to bid was to have a cost for all the greens to see exactly what a contractor would charge us, to see if there was some way to maybe get a little bit more budget to do more greens. But anyway, we use science to dictate what our recommendation were. Everyone knows the restrooms are in need of upgrade, and we've done our best to address that. So that's our current direction of our plan. All right, so I'm kind of changing gears a little bit with our orientation. You can see the clubhouse on the top, and I've labeled the holes of the front side. We really focused the work on the front side because that's where the driving range was. And again, here's the range, and this is how balls. Yep.
Andy, just give, maybe you can go back and forward. It didn't change. Oh, there we go. We're good
Oh,
now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, we're doing pretty good then. My internet's catching up. Okay, so here's the overall aerial of the plan. Here again is the area for the driving range, kind of dictating where you hit the golf balls. So I'm looking right away at holes number 2 and 3. And the one big thing that I've tried to do with the driving range is to allow for some more turf area, which the only way to go to get more turf is to go forward. And so by going forward, then you're actually bringing holes number 2 and 3 even further into play. So, you know, and you can see here to the I guess to the bottom of the screen here, there's a bunch of trees to the right of hole number 3. You know, immediately I was drawn to those areas as room to maybe expand the golf course. But you know, using history as a guide, there were some issues with going off of our property. So I was really told to just keep inside of our current golf course footprint to do whatever best I could without going outside and really either utilizing other ground or removing trees, all those things. So really I was confined to this area. So when you look back at the range, this is now essentially what a 90-foot, or sorry, this is a 100+ foot steel pole. So you know, we were imagining what 90+ or even 140 foot would look like from a view standpoint, and what that would do to surrounding neighbors and even just the golf experience. So let me use Dairy Creek as an idea. I just did this exact same thing for the county of San Luis Obispo. We renovated the range to do natural grass plus an entirely new kind of experience. This is my point to try to tell everybody here. I know golfers love to use the range to warm up and go hit golf, but the future of golf and attracting more than just golfers and 100% of the community, the revenue potential for that driving range is just unbelievable. And I've got multiple experiences that show that now whether or not we go as far as the top tracer or not, people are playing less golf, at least pre-pandemic. We're playing less golf and practicing more. And I actually even experienced that myself. I have 3 young boys, and I know that it's much easier for me to take them to the driving range or a practice facility than it is to actually play golf. And so let's go to our proposed solution. I expanded the range so that we could increase the size of the turf, artificial turf, increase the size of the number of people that could hit on the tee at the same time, and then keep it safe and eliminate the need for netting. And so by doing so, I've eliminated the second and portions of the third hole and revised the routing a little bit to account for the changes. Let me briefly just go over this. Number 1 is now what used to be number 8. I guess traditionally that was a original first hole. I pushed the first green, what is now the first green, 8th green, back to create a par 5 as an opener. The tees on what was old number 9, number 2, the tees go up just slightly and maintain a par 4, but redo the tees to account for that. And then what is now 1 and green number 3 and hole number 4 now gets revised into a whole series of new orientation to make room for the range. So number 1 becomes a shorter par 4, but the new green, very close to that old shelter that's off into the native there, that gets removed. Hole number 4 is now essentially the approach of what the old number 3-hole was. That's the reason why I put the tees there. Now, I do want to put a little, this graphic does not show a back tee. I want to put a little extra yardage to make it a little longer than 157 yards per some staff feedback. But that was originally located to account for what would be normally the approach into the green. And then number 5, what now is hole number 4, gets split up into 2 holes, a shorter par 4 and a par 3, which to me, I understand that there was some initial feedback. Certainly heard that from staff in terms of lengthening or shortening the golf course. But I think, there's still some jury to be, some conversation to be had as to whether or not the 200 yards is worth the experience that we're going to be gaining with a safe and more robust and a better, just flat out better practice facility. But I understand I design golf courses for a living, so I'm not at all here to create pushover golf courses. So if you think about the new greens, the new bunkers, and the new orientation, there is no reason to believe that this can't be some of the most the best holes on the golf course, even though they might be a little shorter on the scorecard. There's no way in my mind that they're going to be any less challenging, less interesting, and quite honestly, they'll be a lot more fun to play. Let me finish the conversation of the slides. I'll come back real quick, but this is the summary of the layout. I want to blow up and just say, one of the reasons why we have to take out holes 2 and 3 the way we are is I've pushed that grass tee all the way into the middle of the range. So I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but your artificial turf is way near the clubhouse. I've got all natural grass turf coming all the way out into the range for plenty of natural turf. And then I've got an expanded patio concept with the short game area, some seating areas. Really exciting in my mind that this granted, I understand golfers want the golf course to be as good as possible. The range is kind of a warm up, but this is really an untapped potential, as I've suggested. All the greens need to be rebuilt, and so we are doing a modified rebuild per Fred Astrom. So all the greens will be excavated at some point in the plan. At least the new greens in our plan will be following this recommendation. Will be completely excavated, all new sand, all new drainage, all new bent grass. The greens that we're going to build are going to be industry standard, as good as anybody in the state, as good as we did down in Hobbs, as good as I've done across the country. I work for Olympia Fields in Chicago that just hosted the BMW this last year. Their South course, they have 2 courses that they hosted on the north. I'm renovating the South, and I'm using this specification to rebuild a few greens at the South course. So this isn't a cheap section. This is top quality. And I'm convinced that your new greens are going to be as good as anybody. Did I lose somebody?
You're good.
Are we there? I'm here. Darn it. Did I lose the view? I think so. My Zoom is telling me that it's connecting.
You just froze up, Andy. We can still hear you.
Yeah, I called in on the phone, so that's
Oh, I see.
that was at least a cover. That was a cover there. So if I lost my internet, then it wouldn't hurt me so bad. Yeah. So, and I might have you go to the back end of your presentation, because I want this group to see how we're building the greens and building the bunkers, because I think it's important for them to see the quality that we're expecting when we do the work. Do you have the ability to pull that up real quick?
Yes, I'm doing that right now. What slide do you want?
I would go to slide 34. $34 is going to be where we left with the greens. If you saw that, the discussion about the green construction.
It's up.
All right. Okay. So that's the greens. Now go to the next solution for the proposed solution of the bunkers. This is a picture of dirt with a bunch of concrete and some plastic. That is new liners being put in a project of mine, the same way that I intend to build the bunkers at Los Alamos. So they'll be edged, new drainage put in and protected with a concrete liner on the faces, and then a fabric on the bottom. Now the plastic is just there to cover it, to keep protect it from dust. But go to the next slide. You'll see it completed with turf around it and bunker sand in it. So this is during construction of the bunkers completed. So once that drainage is installed and edged, the sand goes in, the sod goes around it. So this is industry standard, and I'm doing a complete bunker project for a private country club in Scottsdale, and we are building bunkers the exact same way as this picture is showing. And then finally go to the next slide of prefabricated restrooms. We have out for bid in our bid package a pre-manufactured brand new two restrooms, one on the front and one on the back. New location, probably around the 7. What is you guys call the well, I would call the 7Ts, and then also over by the current restroom on hole 12. All right, let's go to the final slide of the cost estimate. You see how I've just kind of broken it down through the range redesign, the bunkers, the restrooms, and contingency. All of these costs include gross receipts, and we have a contingency left in the budget. This is what we went, essentially what you just saw within the front 9 is the bid package that we sent out. We're not in the current bid package for 1.9 million. We're not able to get all the bunkers done. We are not able to rebuild all the greens, but we are rebuilding the holes that were in the plan. We're completely renovating the driving range with the targets, with the potential of upgrading everything around the target, or the entire master plan, or the entire range plan. We do want to redo some of the bunkers on the backside per staff's feedback. There's some really bad bunkers. We want to make sure all the worst bunkers are taken care of, but we've also then did an added alternative to where we wanted a price from the contractor to do all the bunkers, and then a price to do all the greens per square foot of each. So if for some reason we were able to either get the bids to come back under budget, or ask council for perhaps more budget, we'd have the ability to pull the trigger on that through the contractor. Now, knowing that, and I guess let me just summarize here. I'm excited about the plan. I think this is a huge improvement to what's out there. Does it do everything that's needed? No, it does not. But I have no doubt that if this plan was instituted and built, we're sending it out to all golf course contractors, people that understand golf. Once it's been built, I think you'll see what the potential is, and hopefully show the council that there's more work to be done, because these holes are so much better than the rest that we just need to finish all the others. So with that, I guess I'll close, and I'll open it up to conversations, and just let me know if there's any slides. Just tell Ann to go back to whichever slide that you want to talk about. Ann, was that good? I know it maybe took a little longer than you like, but there's a lot here. We've been working at this for a number of months, so it's hard to summarize that in a quick meeting, but thanks for having me.
I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and just put up maybe just a plan, just in case somebody wants to reference it. But I thought what we could do is just start with, and then we can get to comments, just because I think. So does anyone want to ask questions about what they've heard?
Sure, I'll ask one.
And please state your name and speak up so Andy can hear you.
Okay, I'm Greg Yearling, resident here in Los Alamos, avid golfer. I'm wondering why the area to the east of hole number 4 wasn't considered in some of the redesign efforts.
Largely that goes back to 2010 that I mentioned earlier, and there was a big discussion. I think Cliff mentioned it. There was a big meeting at Fuller Lodge, and there was a big debate between open space and saving trees and trail relocation. Is that the area you're talking about, to the west of the corpse?
No, west.
East. South.
So
You're talking about the same thing.
we're talking about the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a maintenance road that goes through
Yeah.
there, and there's mounds of dirt, and it's a pretty wide open area.
And there are,
It's not really open space.
yeah, and there are trails through there as well. So yes, that really comes back to the initial debate. I think Mike Lippiat has
Yeah,
something
I
to
think
say.
he's talking, I think you're actually talking about two different places.
Okay.
So Greg's talking about an area between current number 4 fairway and where the maintenance barn is.
Mhm.
And then we have a large berm, and then on the other side, when we cut down trees and limbs and stuff, we stockpile them there to be moved to eco
Yeah.
station. So I think that's what he was talking about. The other, the trail issue and relocation, that would have been south of current number 3.
Right.
So this is actually,
But I think there is
Yeah.
a connection.
There
You can
is,
get
but that's
on
deeper.
both sides. There's a trail connection on
But
both
the
sides.
other
But it's
side,
deeper, further away.
Yeah. It really just goes back to the initial discussion and council direction that not expanding the footprint of the golf course, quite honestly, and that wasn't what council was interested in pursuing with the improvements. And they said, you know, I don't know if any of you remember, but it's like, why can't we just do the irrigation? There's lots of discussions about it's not just about irrigation. And then there was a big debate about how much money we want to put into this one asset versus, you know, looking at what the dollars were required at the time and allocating that all to this one asset versus all the other requests that were out there. So that's where that comes from.
Can the decision change? And what would be required to make that decision change?
What would be required is probably more public outreach with the greater constituency. And then going back to council and saying asking if they want us to redirect and go in that direction. I would say the other limitation with expansion is also just fiscal constraints as well. That does come with budget implications. So more to do, but that's one constraint that I understand is the frustration of the comments that I've heard.
I have a question, Kurt Annis. You have 7,500 square feet for bunkers. Do you know roughly how many bunkers that would include?
Can you hear that, Andy?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a little bit confusing because the 7,500 square feet is in addition to the plans of the new holes. So if you look at the overall plan, you know, hole number 1, new number 1 has 2 bunkers. New number 3 has 2 bunkers. Number 4 has 1 bunker. 5 and 6 each all have 1 bunker. So 7,500 square foot was like a delta that said, if I did all the plan, I could have, according to the budget, I could do 7,500 extra square feet. So that allows us to actually do more bunkers on the golf course.
Okay.
So I'm expecting to have about half of the bunkers done with our budget, but really it's all going to come back to how the numbers would have come back on the bid.
And that was our strategy on the bid. The market's a little volatile right now. And so our strategy was to ask for unit pricing so we can adjust up and down based on how the bids come in.
Cheryl Nichols, I have a question about range redesign. How much money does the golf course make on range versus golf fees? Course fees?
that's a really good question that I can answer, but not right now in front of you. I have to look at
Well,
it.
It's an economy per scale kind of thing. We're putting all this money into the range redesign, but does it generate that kind of income?
It's a very busy range. It does generate a lot of income through just daily people using it, as well as range passes and fusion passes. But it wasn't so much the revenue stream that was being prioritized as much as it was the liability of the range as it is right now.
So with that in mind, were there any kind of other redesigns for the range that would accommodate, like lowering the tee boxes to make the balls not travel so far, maybe, you know, putting it towards 16 instead of 2?
Do you want to address that, Andy?
You know, that kind of a thing.
Sure.
The question.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I know I heard the question. That was pretty good. Yeah, no, great question, and the answer to all that is yes, all that was considered. So one of the things we are doing is lowering the range. But I would say the one thing that was eliminated from consideration quickly, at least in my mind, is to not, if we're going to do some work on the range, that we wouldn't do anything that would constitute a less than quality range. So full flight golf balls, you know, no netting, as much natural grass as possible. And then trust me, just because I'm suggesting that we're not going to have any netting doesn't mean that, you know, I'm not cautious on how much space that we need for netting. So, you know, to the end of the day, you know, the amount of space that we need to remove the netting is what I meant. And so, yes, all those things were considered, and even relocating it to another area was considered. But then again, you start asking yourself the question, what's the cost to do that? And what other impacts happen around the golf course? Because, you know, it's like a series of dominoes. If you start hitting one domino, it affects everything else down the line. My sense is that this was the least amount of impact possible to address the issues with the range. And then let me just give you another quick, you know, these are experiences across the country. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting that's the same for Los Alamos, but I can tell you that I've seen countless ranges when renovated, and the appropriate amount of management is put in there. So, i.e., food and beverage, range balls being available, quality mowing and conditioning. The renovation of this range is the only chance that you have to recover your costs on this range by putting up nets at 140 feet, keeping everything as is basically throwing really good money after bad. And I just don't, that just was not an option for me. And I can tell you, it's still very clear in my mind when I first was hired 8 years ago about return on investment. And so whatever it is that you're doing on the range now, I expect it to triple or quadruple, if not more. I've seen ranges go well over $1 million on 24/7 or 12 months a year type of environment. So this is the only way to get that money back.
Mike, did you have something to say earlier? You had your hand up.
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Any more questions about just questions?
I have one. So I was glad to
Yeah.
hear Christy Ortega, and I'm with the Los Alamos Golf Association. So you talked a little bit, Andy, about the range bringing in potentially more golfers and having it more utilized. And I don't know if I understand correctly, but I know one of the goals for the Golf Association is to expand, you know, membership and to have more golfers on the course, because I think that's important, a common goal for the county and the LAGA. And so I want to understand better, I guess, the county goal of that, and that's kind of what your priority is, and then in conjunction with that to offset costs. But also, when we were talking about it in the LAGA meeting last night, we were talking about the number of golfers that this directly impacts currently, who can actually hit it the 300, you know, over the thing, which I think we came up with like 3 to 5% of us can do that. So I guess my question is, one, what is the goal for the county with this money in the end? And then two, what kind of consideration does that balance with the number of golfers that it's directly impacting now and kind of our wish list?
Well, there's a couple things. I mean, Andy kind of talked about the safety issue. That really was the priority of this. It was really Andy's experience, because we're not designing this as staff. It's Andy's experience where he's bringing that to the table. That's why we hire design experts to make recommendations. And he's got more, you know, he's looking at trends, he's looking at what other golf courses are doing and trying to bring that to us to say, these are the potentials. I know that the golf course is a subsidized operation. It is considered an enterprise fund, but it doesn't pay for itself. And so from that perspective, you know, what it would do is reduce the required subsidy and maybe take pressure off, you know, consideration of additional fees going up in the future if there were additional revenues because of volume. But I don't think we have any kind of business plan or timeline or goal that was part of this project that addressed that. I think Cheryl mentioned like you're spending all this money, you know, expanding the range, but I think what Andy was very strong in his opinion on has been that, but that's nothing compared to the 900,000 just for the netting. And I will say that putting in high netting is an option based on the goals of the project and the priorities of the project. It's just, there are other there are other aesthetic qualities, considerations. I mean, how is the community going to feel that overlook it to see the 140-foot netting go up? I don't know. So there is a greater constituency that may feel like the aesthetic implications of that are an issue. And I don't, and then it's just a long-term maintenance. That was a goal of the project, to reduce both with irrigation, but just in general, our obligations. So that again would just play into the business plan. We would have to budget for that, and the golf course would have to come up with the money to do the maintenance for safety reasons. But did I do okay, Andy, as a non-golfer?
Yeah, no, that was great. The only thing I'd add about driving ranges is, and trust me, I completely understand the question about what percentage of people does this affect, but quite honestly, it only takes one golf ball, right? It only takes one golf ball to hit somebody, whether you hit it, 100 yards or 350 yards. So honestly, we have to design for that one golf ball. That said, $900,000 is a lot of money to put up netting. That, to me, just from my own money, why would I want to put up netting when I know that I can improve this driving range to a point to where it will be the best practice facility anywhere close to Los Alamos, and you'll be able to have food and beverage right outside. It's just the perfect scenario for everything that I'm seeing, and I think there's no doubt that it's going to pay itself back, and then it's also going to bring people to the golf course.
All right, Andy, your comments raised probably 3 or 4 responses here, so I'm going to go one by one. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Andy, my name is John Stam. You have mentioned planning for the one golf ball. Golf is inherently has risks on the golf course. How are you going to plan? I have been hit more times on the golf course than I have on the driving range. How are you going to address that inherent risk on the golf course itself if you're worried about one golf ball?
Well, I do everything I possibly can to design within standards set forth by the industry, and I'm only changing a few golf holes, and I can tell you that I've accounted for the best I can. It's within my abilities, and so no, I can't keep every golf ball contained, but what I can do is play the percentages. And if I can lower the risk of that one golf ball going and hitting someone, then I've done my job. It's a golf course. You have a risk of somebody hitting an errant shot. That's why I pay $12,000 in errors and omissions insurance every year, is to protect myself in case it happens. I've not used it yet. I don't intend to at Los Alamos or any place. But I'm lowering the risk as much as I possibly can.
Question and then a couple comments on follow-up.
And this is Kurt again.
Said. Kurt Annis.
Thank you.
What about number 1? It appears that it's still in the range, and actually number 1 green. If you're moving the teeing area forward, that would now become a concern for people getting hit from this range. You're not really mitigating that. That's a question. Comment on what you said earlier. The $900,000 that it would cost to put up the larger poles leaves us with $300,000 more to put towards the course, based on your range redesign there, the current course. And you mentioned the aesthetics, and there's the community that overlooks it. There's 10 homes up there. It might be interesting to see if they really have a problem. It's not really the whole community. 10 homes.
No, I just said the greater.
No, I know, but you said the community looks over the course, and it's a small subset.
That's just it's just a habit
But
of, we work for the government, we work for all, not
That's
for
just
one.
puts some perspective on,
Yeah.
on the numbers.
Understood. Andy, do you have any response to that, or?
Yeah, so the third hole was what it was the first hole. Now the third hole is close to the driving range. However, the tee will be directed as far to the right. The range tee will be directed as far to the right as possible. I intend to also try to plant some more trees, but I think, on a plan standpoint, could somebody hit one down the third, what now is the new third fairway? Probably could be. But the way the tee is oriented off the range and the way that I would direct the tee, most golfers slice it. So again, I feel, one of the reasons too why there's balls that go down the current first hole is that artificial turf tee sort of aims you that way. It's not the greatest aiming, and I would like to fix that. But again, it's reducing the chances, and I feel comfortable with the way I've laid it out.
quick follow-up. Do you-
And then in terms of the visuals, I can't speak for the 10 homeowners, but I don't know that anybody wants to come on a golf course that's already kind of, you know, in need of repair and just see a cage full of nets. And so I think that to me is just now a matter of, could you put netting up on the range and call it good? Yes, you could. That's absolutely an option. If this group is strong enough in determining that that's what you want for your golf course, I'd be sorry to see that. But it certainly is an option. I don't think it's a very good one, but it's an option.
Do you know how far the number 1 green is from the forward part of the new proposed, I'm sorry, 3, I guess it's hole number 3. How close the number 3 green is now from the forward part of the proposed driving range?
Yeah, I'd have to measure it to be certain, but I have a little line that's drawn on this plan. It says 300 yards. So if I rotated that arrow and pointed to the green, I'm going to guess it's probably 330 yards or so from the forward set of the tee, forward part of the new range tee.
Yeah, I have a question. We're 52 minutes into this meeting.
We're not
and
going
we
to.
haven't had a chance to
Go ahead.
talk about, I don't have a question.
Go ahead. Comments are fun. Go ahead.
Well, then I'd like to come in front of the group.
Sure. Tell your name for Andy.
Cliff Whitney.
Thank you.
This is going to take a few minutes.
We're not going to turn everybody off at 9 o'clock.
First of all, I want to thank Ann for her email last night. You know, we have 2 huge problems with how this process is going, and one of them has been addressed by your email, so we thank you. The other one is we just don't like the plan, essentially slide 32. And before I get into that, why we don't like it, I have 2 comments about Andy's presentation. One, and these are comments, not questions. One is, you said there's data about how many balls go over that net. I want to remind you, everybody, that there's a huge gaping hole in the present net, and plus there's several small holes at the bottom of the net. So though we have a count, we don't know how many of those balls actually go over the net versus through those holes. The second point I want to make is I heard Andy say twice, we need 100% solution to this problem. And when I hear 100%, as a scientist and many of the educated people in this community, that just rubs us the wrong way. That says that 99.9999 is not acceptable. Only 100 is acceptable. And I want to remind you, following up on what John Stam said, by my count, there are 14 holes on this golf course that have either 1 or 2 adjoining holes. And it's not unusual for you to play around the golf and hear the word yelled once or even twice during your round. And that's every single day. And so every time you hear the word 4, that's a near miss, someone getting hit, or someone getting hit. And for anyone to claim that we need a 100% solution, and that is the only acceptable solution for the driving range, personally, I find that either irrational or argumentative. Those comments are addressed to the county employees and the county council who may hear this. So with that in mind, one other comment is we as a community have not had a chance to build a consensus towards a solution of the driving range safety. And I hope we don't get into a discussion here where as individuals, we all give you our private solutions.
Our intention is to set up additional follow-up meetings to kind of do a deeper dive for those who want to talk design and have Andy work on, listen to these comments and present to us what he thinks he's willing to consider.
Okay, great. So with that in mind, I'll dive into my main remarks. Why don't we like the proposed design? And it boils down to length. And what you could do, a shortcut would be just say, what's the present length of the course? What would be the new length of the course? And by the way, it's not 200 yards, it's 340 yards. I am guilty of putting the 200-yard number out there, but at least two of us have redone the calculation, and it's 340 yards shorter. But I think for non-golfers, especially county counselors, just hearing 7,000 yards versus 6,200 yards or 68 versus 61, those numbers are a little, they don't mean as much to non-golfers as they do to golfers. So I try to do this analysis a different way. And on any par 72 course, there are 12 par 4s. And I'm going to use some numbers that are geared towards men, but in no way does this apply only to men. Because as men tees move back, women's tees move back. As men tees move up, women's tees tend to move up. And I know it's not politically correct to call them men's and women's tees, but for the sake of clarity, that's the way I'm going to do it. And for the man, 400 yards, in my mind, is a distance where beyond that, a man would consider that, hey, that's a challenging par 4, or that's a par 4 that really grabs my attention. Where something less than 400 yards may be, hey, I could maybe hit a 3-wood off the tee, or this isn't so challenging, but you know, I'll do my best, and I need to birdie it and that kind of thing. So 400 yards, I think, is a good metric, and a metric where, as you see as I get into this, that I think golfers and non-golfers can relate. And that's not to say, especially towards Andy, that you can't have a challenging par 4 that's short, or a wide open par 4 that's over 400 yards that's relatively easy for a long hitter. I'm not, going to make that claim, but just go with me on this, that 400 yards is a point at which a course can be compared. How many par 4s over 400? So here are the numbers. I've looked at several courses in our area. Black Mesa has 7 holes. Remember, 10 is the max. 7 holes over 400 yards. Taos has 9 holes over 400 yards. Toa, and I used the shortest of the 3 nines and the longest of the 3 nines to get an average, has 4 holes over 400 yards. Santa Ana, again, I used the shortest and the longest of the 3 par 9s, 8 holes over 400 yards. Sandia, and I did not use the back tees of Sandia because Sandia is an especially long course, so I used the next to back tees, has 7 holes over 400 yards. Los Alamos, in its present state, has 4 holes under 400 yards. And the new design will have a grand total of 2 holes over 400 yards. So let me read those numbers again. 7, 9, 4, 8, 7, and the proposed 2. Oh, and I left out Marty Sanchez, sorry about that, which is probably the most relevant one because it's a municipal course in Santa Fe, just like we have a municipal course, that has 7 holes over 400 yards. So not only with 2 pale in comparison to all these other courses, it's not even in the ballpark. We're being lapped. So that's the first point. The second point is on total, and I'm not going to go through the numbers because they're not, maybe the absolute numbers aren't important as the differences. So roughly the new course will be 1,000 yards shorter than 5 of the other courses I've talked about, and 600 yards shorter than the shortest other course of all the ones I've looked at. So 600 yards and 1,000 yards. Now, I'll read Andy's mind right now saying, well, you're going to be a par 71. That hasn't been talked about. but we're gonna have 5 par 3s. We're gonna go down to par 71, which is not bad. There's lots of par 71 courses. So you have to take that into account. So even if you subtract off 200 yards, because we'll now be a par 71, we're still gonna be a lot shorter, not by a little, a lot shorter than all the other courses in northern New Mexico, the ones that I looked at. And then as far as the par 3s go, we'll have 5 of them, which is almost unheard of. But we will be, and when we talk about par 3s, we don't talk about yardage as much as club. We'll be anywhere from 2 to 3 clubs shorter on average on our par 3s because we're putting in some short par 3s here. 2 to 3 clubs shorter on the par 3s. So when I came up with these numbers, I had a feeling this was the case, but when I came up with these numbers, hard data, I was shocked. And the first thing that came to my mind is, gosh, this sounds like a old man's course, old man, old ladies course. And when I thought of that, I said, it's like a retirement village course. So I asked myself, well, is it a retirement village course? And I thought of the Villages in Florida. And hopefully most people know what the Villages is, but it's the largest retirement community in the United States by far. So I did some research there. And they have 50 courses at the Villages. And I think that might be 59 holes, but nevertheless, either 25 or 50 courses. And they have some executive courses, and I'm not saying what we have is an executive course. It's not, but it's a short course. So I looked at some typical courses in the Villages that weren't executive courses. And to be precise, you know, the names won't mean anything to you. One of the websites had something called the Lakes and the Oaks. That course in this village, in this retirement community, has 5 pars over 400 yards, 5 holes over 400 yards. And another one, Tequesta Seminole, has 4 pars, 4 par 4s over 400 yards. And by the way, the average yardage, it's not just the number. By far, the average of our par 4s, all 2 of them, they're 403 and 404 yards. They barely make this criteria. So at an average of 403, we'd be 30 to 40 yards shorter on average than these other courses.
At elevation.
And yeah, when compared to Florida, you probably have to add 10 to 15% because they're at sea level. So we're not talking about a course that's just short. We're not talking about a course that's on the bottom 20 percentile. We are talking about a course that is a 3 standard deviation away from typical courses in northern New Mexico and these retirement courses in Florida. Okay, I'll stop there with the data. Now I just want to move on to my personal comments about what this information tells me. First of all, this course will no longer be challenging or fun for an above average or average golfer, and will be downright boring for a highly skilled golfer. And we have some highly skilled golfers here. I'm not one of them. I'll let them speak for themselves.
Not 72, yes.
Shh, don't.
Don't shoot, Cliff.
The next 2 points are not up for debate because they're personal actions I'll take. But when I'm out of town and I meet other golfers at a different golf course, we're golfers. We invariably talk about our home courses and what they're like. I will no longer be bragging about Los Alamos Golf Course. I will no longer be encouraging people at TOA or Black Mesa or other courses to come up and try our golf course. It's not going to be a golf course that I'm proud of. I will no longer be taking out-of-town visitors who are real golfers to play our golf course. I'll have to tell them we're going to go off the hill and play a different golf course because I don't think you're going to enjoy this golf course. Now, if they're ranked beginners, I'll play here. I don't want to be unreasonable. I'm asking you guys not to be unreasonable. I wouldn't be unreasonable. And I think this is my last point, unless I think of something else real quick. We have a golf tournament called the ACI. It's our biggest tournament. It's something we're extremely proud of. And it's the one tournament that draws in the most players from out of town. I'm not on the ACI committee, but the ACI committee is going to have to do something in the next invitation once this plan goes into effect, if it did go into effect. And that is they're going to have to put a disclaimer in the invitation that you're not coming to play the same golf course you're used to coming to play. And in my opinion, most of those golfers won't bother coming. Any questions?
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I could, and I'd like to read a prepared statement. I am John Stam. I'll read it prepared because that'll make me much more briefer. I won't ramble all over the place.
Take your time.
And Andy, most of this has to do with process. A little bit on design, but mostly process. But anyway, the Los Alamos Golf Association asked me to represent them at this meeting. And so I am going to be representing the Los Alamos Golf Association. As a board member of the LAGA, I've been asked to represent the LAGA and its 130 members of this meeting. I'm also speaking on my own behalf as a golfer that has played golf in Los Alamos Golf Course for 59 years. I have also donated hundreds of hours to the golf course for the betterment of the conditions at the course. The LAGA would like to express its disappointment with the procedure used to develop the current CIP project. As far as we know, this is the first chance for the public to interface and speak to officials about this particular object. We consider this to be late in the process, as this modification project is already out to bid as we speak at this meeting. We are stakeholders as golfers at Los Alamos and also as taxpayers in Los Alamos County. This is our money you're spending without our input. The three golfers who volunteered to work with the county on this phase of the CIP project have all stated that they had no knowledge of the modifications proposed to the county for this project. They have also stated they have not met with any officials involved with the CIP project since December of 2020. No golfer that we know of had any knowledge of the proposed modifications until Tuesday morning of this week. The LAGA does not believe that this meeting constitutes due diligence by the county for the public information responsibilities of a CIP project. This meeting is occurring far too late in the process. The LAGA would also like to express its displeasure with the proposed modifications to Los Alamos Golf Course. The proposed modifications total $1,915,841.96 in expenses. $1,238,341.96 is to be used as a driving range redesign. Less than 3% of the golfers can outdrive the current driving range. For 97% of golfers, the current range is adequate for their purposes. To use 65% of the remaining CIP funds to benefit 3% or less of the golfers does not seem to be a wise use of the money to us. It would be better to spend 100% of the CIP money to the benefit of 100% of the golfers. This is a better use of the money. We will let others comment on the wisdom of turning an already short golf course by today's standards into an even shorter course. The LAGA would also like to state our support for a petition being circulated, calling for Los Alamos County Council to put an immediate pause on the implementations of these proposed plans and modifications until a more thorough discussion can be had regarding these modifications. Thank you for the consideration of these matters. The board members of Los Alamos Golf Association, Laura Crusette, President, Scott Winiger, Vice President, Christy Ortega, Secretary, Marcy Johnson, Treasurer, John Stam, Jeff Dunning, Jill Cook, Patrick Metzger, and Andre Trottier, members. I already submitted this to your note taker.
Anyone else?
A comment. I spent the last couple of days trying to get some signatures for the petition and happened to spend a lot of time out at the driving range doing so. Some of the observations and things I noted is that roughly 75 people use the driving range on the days that I was out there. So that gives you some idea of revenue stream. That's about $150 because it costs $2 to get a bucket. And most people, well, somebody might have gotten more than one bucket, but it gives you an idea of a revenue stream on Thursday and Friday, or I guess it was Wednesday and Thursday. Of the people that I talked to, my first question was, have you heard about the changes to the golf course, proposed changes, which are going to bid? I didn't have a single person say yes to that question. I did have one person say yes to that question. It happened to be a counselor that was hitting balls. So let me correct that. There were a number of out-of-town people that had come in that because I'd asked them if they lived in Los Alamos. It was curious. A lot of them didn't even use the range and went off and their interest was in the golf course. They said it was a really nice track and they liked coming up here. There weren't that many. There were about, I'd say less than 10 people from out of town. So, and listening to Andy suggest that we might get a lot of revenue from a driving range. I think one thing to take into consideration, we are from Santa Fe, we're 45 minutes. From Espanola, we're, maybe 20, 30 minutes away. I don't really think people are going to come up to Los Alamos to say, oh, they got a really long driving range there, and let's go up there to hit some balls. So I think we're pretty much the customer base for a driving range would be Los Alamos. And you might want to ask the Los Alamos golf community if that's the kind of thing that they would really like to have so that they could go out and hit balls and have something to eat. And I think what we have loudly said is, no, what we want is our course to be improved. And that money, the 1.9 million, we were hoping was going to be used for the improvement of greens, sand traps, tee boxes, more trees, and the like. And what are we getting? Some bunkers might be improved in the restrooms. So that kind of irritates everybody. And I think Cliff made a good point as to that what we get in return is a course that's even smaller now. And then if you really think about it, the 2 or 3%, and it may be as high as 5%, because the days that I was out there, the younger people weren't there. And I know that more younger people are going to hit it over that fence than us, than the older population. So let's say 5%. So for the 5% we're building this for, what are they getting? They're the ones that can hit it the furthest, and now they're getting a shorter golf course. So it's kind of counterproductive. Of the people that I saw hit it over the fence, I asked them that question, and they said, no, I would prefer to have a longer course as opposed to a longer driving range. So, these are some of the observations that came to mind when over the last couple of days talking to people out on the range.
Can I ask this group a question? And again, I'm not Andy. I don't have expertise in golf course design. I'm an architect, so buildings are my thing. Is there, because I actually heard Andy say he's going to do more than just the sand traps and restrooms, but and I think restrooms are actually quite low on the priority in terms of how far the money's going to go. But is there a way to make the improvements without the real estate? Because I'm asking this question because the netting is going to take a big chunk of our money too, whether you see it on the ground in real estate or whether you see it netting. I don't know that it nets us more money to really make the improvements to let's just say we don't change the configuration at all, and we just invested into that, into the course, and it's fairly similar with the lengths that you, or it is with the lengths that you have now. Is that satisfactory? Because we're still constrained with real estate, no matter what we do. I'm just asking the question. Because that is the
from
option
my-
to look at the netting
Well,
and put the rest of the money into what you have now. That is an option we can take forward if we get consensus on that.
I'll tell you what I've gotten in conversations I've had with people. If we just fix, if you want to put up the netting and we can keep the golf course we have and improve the things that, you know, we were hoping would be improved, that's a good start. But it would be nice to extend the course if we have the option or the opportunity. I don't know, people can
That piece
have
of
their
it was
comment.
never part of the scope of project,
understand
and
that.
safety netting was the top priority, and that's what we're debating here. Now the reality of cost is setting in. So I totally understand.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason that wasn't, you didn't appreciate that is because you probably didn't work with the community.
I honestly think there's a really big factor here that's neither here nor there of when this issue came up. And that was the timing of when how expensive the netting and safety issue would be and how high it would be. That's really what triggered this, nothing else.
Yeah.
That if that was known earlier on, that would have certainly been part of the discussions earlier on. Go ahead.
My name is Steve Williams, and I'm just wondering, I don't know what the netting is now, the height, 30 feet, 35 feet. Why not just double it? I don't know what the cost would be. I'm sure it would be a lot less than what we're seeing there, and limit the driving range to irons only.
Better balls.
Does anybody
Well, the
who's,
thing I've heard about
Mike, do you want to address that, or Corey?
the balls is that they don't fly correctly.
I mean, I think Andy's addressed it from a liability perspective. He's unwilling to go below 100 from what he knows about the flight. I'll let Mike and Corey talk about limiting.
And I think one of the challenges for us as a government agency is risk management. You're right. Once you're on the course, you own your golf ball. So if something happens and you have the inherent risk, as Cliff said, of being on a golf course, you know when you're out there hitting the Thursday, if you hear 4, you need to take action. Driving range, we have created an environment where people think they can hit their golf balls, and now if you're on 2 or 3 as it's currently configured, all right, whoever's driving needs to know to yell 4 to you, and it's called a known hazard. We know that there's somebody up here that can drive it and peg you. If I don't address that, someday, somehow, it could be negligence. So again, risk mitigation is huge, huge on our minds. Dead golf balls, so I'm a hacker. I've played for 40 plus years. The reason that I go to a range is try to figure out how far I can drive a golf ball with a golf club. So if I'm using dead balls, that kind of messes me up when I try to get out on a golf course. And usually the driving range is the first place I go, especially if I came here or I've actually been in Florida. And I try to figure out where my 7-iron is going to land so I can at least quasi play intelligently. So I think dead golf balls, we can have that conversation. If I'm trying to hone my skill, that's challenging for me. So those are two thoughts of mine on it. Again, it's a conversation we can have it, and if people like dead golf balls, okay. But our young golfers, and especially, we have one of the greatest teaching groups for young golfers up here, and they need some place to hone their skills. And I think that's something that we as been in this group for a while of golfers is, let's also measure the fact of what do we need up here to be the next group of us, this group that's coming up. We know we had the fall off of golfers for a number of years, and then the advent of Tiger and his following kind of pushed that up a little bit. The years since he's been injured and unable to play with him, and seeing another little tail off. It was fantastic last year when we saw COVID and everybody dusted off their golf clubs to get back out. And even though you guys know the restrictions that were not only here but across the nation, people were clamoring to dust off those clubs and do something. We just got to figure out that balance here, guys. You know, and I think risk mitigation is high on our list. We just need to think about those things as we keep going through this process.
Later for the 11 Diamond Drive, driving by. You know, why not do something there, I guess, you know?
I don't know, 10-foot fence is pretty good. I guess we can net it. Again, I have actually came from a community that one said, you know what, according to state law, it's the golfer's responsibility to die. Once you address the ball and hit it, it's on you. So if you hurt somebody, it's a personal injury case and you two guys fight it out. Another community said, you know what, we don't want that. And they actually 500 yards along a residential street, there's a 75-foot net with telephone poles. And every year it was 50-50. You would get 50 people to call and say, you know what, that is the god awfulest, ugliest thing I've said. And I'd get one or two a year that would go, oh, hey, I got a golf ball in my yard. So.
How is the liability on the driving range is on the rest of the course?
No, whatever. I don't care.
Andy, you want to say something?
Was that for me?
Well, I thought you were trying to jump in.
No, that was not me. I do need to jump off in a couple of minutes, though. I have plenty of thoughts based on the comments, but I'll let
Any final questions?
I'll let this meeting go.
My name is Jeff Franzak, and I'm wondering, and you asked the same question, didn't get answers. How high is the existing netting? And if we went to the option of the 90-foot instead of 140-foot, what would that get us? And how many people would be restricted to not being able to hit driver off the range instead of everyone, you know, being affected?
Okay. Andy, do you want to answer that and maybe then, or the best you can, and then maybe make some final comments before you jump off? And we can keep talking.
Sure. What help? I didn't quite hear all that question. Can you ask that again?
How high is the current netting? Why not just go to 90 foot? And then what limitations would we have to provide to what clubs you could use based on that?
Yeah. So I think the netting is 40 feet tall, and to the earlier comment about 100% versus 99.9%, I totally understand. However, somebody's besides me or Dave Tanner will have to, make the approval from the county standpoint of doing less than 100, 99.9%, whatever percentage is adequate. We're not the ones that are going to make that call. Someone else will. So we've always said that if the county wants to take that liability of deciding which depth or height of netting, it's their golf course. They can do what they choose. So in terms of dead golf balls, all that is possible. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I just wanted to add, that's a very big ask of our municipality to take that kind of liability on, especially given for what, when you're a government and when you have money, consider taxpayer dollars. And so taxpayer dollars would pay for that kind of insurance or liability that we take on, and we would have to confer with our insurance companies as well. So that would be a huge ask.
Well, it's a huge ask for the consultants, and so I would end by this, and certainly, the golf industry is vast, varying perceptions of what golf means to them. Everybody loves the game. We've played it for a variety of different years and times, and a young family with kids that are learning the game sees golf entirely different than when they grow up and they become retired and what kind of golf they play. But what I will say is the golf industry is changing, and it's evolving to an entirely different perspective of golf that what a lot of the younger or the the current generation of golfers see golf. And so I would leave you with this: the fact that there's a sentiment that you would not promote this golf course to your friends and to your colleagues after the county is doing their best to put money into the course is really disappointing. I hate to hear that. I think we need to do better on our process, but what I would say is the industry is changing to a point to where instead of a short executive retirement golf course, this is the future of golf. This is the future for an average golfer plays 5,800 yards to 6,200 yards. That's not my statistic. That's a statistic throughout the entire golf industry. When I bring kids to a golf course, I don't go play 7,000 yards. I play 4,500 yards. I hit golf balls. I putt on the green, and I'm looking out ahead so that I have an industry that's around for the next 20, 30 years. I'm not looking at 5 years down the line. I'm looking at 20, 30 years down the line. And my recommendations are addressing that. I just built a 5,800 yard golf course in the city of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. It's a resort where they play the Honda Classic. And there's such renewed excitement in this community for a 5,800 yard match play golf course. And not once has the owner ever pushed back because he is on board with me of where the golf industry is going. And I want you guys to be leaders. I want to be part of that, but you know what? It's your course and you guys need to decide. I just hope that you don't allow like the old traditional way of golf get in your way of what golf's going to look like in 30 years. I'm 48 years old. I have 3 young boys. I'm here for the betterment of your golf course. And the fact that you would suggest that no one would want to play my golf course when I'm done with it, quite honestly, kind of offends me. But you know what? I wish I was there in person with you and I'd be smiling right now because I think we have a lot of work to do. And I have to prove to you that my golf course is going to be a better golf course than what it is now. And I'm convinced of that. So I'd leave you with that. Hopefully I'm not trying to rub anyone wrong. I'm passionate about what I do. I think I'm good at what I do and I do it for a living. I'm not a scientist. I'm not as smart as this room that I'm talking to. I'm just a golf architect. I draw pictures and I play golf. And I'm convinced that my golf course, when I'm done, will be better than what you have today. So
Okay.
With that, I'd just close.
All right. Thanks, Andy. I know you got to leave, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Got to get off here.
Yeah. My name is Ray Miller. I just wanted to say that and I'm sorry, I don't. Corey. As
Do you need to be the vote?
risk mitigation, right?
Bring him in here.
And I think the general feeling amongst the golfers is trying to mitigate the risk to 100% it results in a drastic change in the golf course, whereas perhaps take a little bit of time and try to figure out maybe a way of mitigating the risk, not 100%, but mitigating the risk to the reasonable, simple fact, because you're always going to have. So I think that's sort of the summary. We would like to see you take some time and reassess how much risk mitigation you want to do and maybe look for other solutions to that.
So let me respond to that and then I'll give you the floor.
Sure.
The plan is to take all this input here. We will develop options, even with pros and cons, even if, Andy doesn't support them. And then we'll have another conversation and invite people to come have this conversation, whatever, 1, 2, 3 times. I don't know what it's going to take. We're going to try to move quickly only because we really do want to get this project back on track. We do want to improve the golf course. We may or may not need to go to council. It really depends on 2 things. One is, do you really want to change the fundamental approvals? It will go back to council in the form of construction approval. So any contract to implement this has to go to council. So it will go to council no matter what. But if it goes to council before that, it'll be because of one of 2 things. We couldn't work within our current budget, or this group feels strongly that no matter what, you really want to expand the course, and you want to do that because those would be I think the 2 big picture things that we could. Otherwise, we do have the latitude to consider options and try to figure out a way to move forward so that we can go out to bid and get a contract. Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead.
So it seems to me like you could solve this problem by dedicating some money to some hitting bays with technology embedded in it that allows the long hitters to hit it, and the computer tells you how far you hit it instead of hitting it over the net and hitting someone on an adjacent hole. So I think there's other ways you can get out of the box a little bit and satisfy all these things and eliminate the risk.
And that could be revenue all year round.
Yeah, revenue generated all year round.
Yeah, sure. We can throw that on the table for sure.
Yeah.
The one thing I like to say, and you know, because I play a lot of different golf courses, and there's all kinds of golf courses that are facing the same problem we have right here with the liability, and they've addressed it in all different manners of options. The other thing I'll say, because I've been up here for a long time, I actually set the original nets for the golf course and those poles. Even when we did this, that liability that you talk about has been with the county for 35 years already.
Right, but I have to remind everybody that safety concern is really what kept this project going from a more global conversation beyond the golfers who are invested in it. Not everyone in this community supports golfing, and that's just a reality we live with. And based on that, we have a responsibility to address it. And once you address it, unfortunately, then it becomes well, how did you address it, and did you address it enough? And that's challenging. But I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but there's different options to address this problem. I didn't hear a single one of those options addressed at all.
He wasn't presenting the options.
Yeah,
That's true.
there are other options.
And that's the goal of these 30 to 60 days, is to develop those so we can all visually see them and talk about them and see where we want to go. There was a couple over here, and then I'll go back.
So I'm wondering, Andy's obviously invested in this, and with all due respect, and he has the experience to do something with this. Is it possible to get a second opinion from somebody else to look over this scope, and if the range is a huge amount of money that we don't want to sink something everybody's going to hate.
Yeah.
And so maybe it would be worth money to and get somebody else involved, even on a just focus on this specific part and see what kind of situation.
Put it on me. I'll make me feel like shit.
I'll ask for not within 30 days. Yeah, much longer.
Let's talk offline. I may have.
Okay. But what I will say, look, Andy,
you go do it. Okay, treat me like shit. I'll treat you. That's how you treat me.
Got to the point too of his professional opinion, and there's a disagreement, and we need to work it out. I also know he will come forward and develop options that he may not agree with, that we're going to put on the table, that he's not going to say you can't do. He's just going to say it wouldn't be his recommendation. And that's the goal of the 30 to 60 days at this point. So I'll commit to that. And then Corey will talk further if he's got other resources of how to address other opinions. But yeah.
So I guess just, and we'll talk longer, but I know some of you are getting antsy and got places to go. We're kind of over our schedule. One, we apologize that this is happening today. We're both fairly new to where this process was. We thought there was some background work that was done that obviously wasn't. So thank you for coming. We put this together on short notice at 8 o'clock, just because that was the only time. And we talked to a couple of you early in the week. This was obviously a hot button item with you guys. We wanted to make the time, take your concerns seriously. So thank you for giving your time this morning. As Ann said, this is the first of several more conversations that will occur. We'd like to do this relatively quickly. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we'll work to get the best possible solution we can get for the money we have, the mitigations that we need to make, and try to put as much improvement and thought into the long-term use of the course as possible. So we'll commit to doing that over the next few weeks. Most of you have Ann's email. Most of my emails on her emails. If you don't, I've got my business cards right outside the door. We really thank you for caring about our community and the golf course and the experience to come and talk to us today. And again, we apologize that we had bad information, and I guess I should have known when Kurt and I were talking on Tuesday or Monday, and we had the darn earthquake and the building started shaking. That should have been my premonition about this. So, again,
I was ominous.
yeah, Cliff was there too, so that probably should have been my sign that, and it was, because immediately after that meeting, I started talking with Ann. We have a little weird relationship here, as Public Works actually builds the stuff, and we kind of try to facilitate the conversations and have the conversations about the afterlife and how it's going to be used, and try to do that. So again, we apologize for causing you and more of your friends the angst that something was being, to quote someone's, railroaded through. That was not our desire, but hopefully we can get to ground zero and go back forward from this and try to get something done.
And I just want to do one last call for comments, because I know there's a few of you had your hands up. So I want to start here, and we'll end with you. Good. Go ahead.
I'm Spike Jones, and I think there's not a person in this room that hasn't had a near miss on number 2 green. I think the consensus, unanimous opinion is something does need to be done. It's not a safe situation that we have out there now. And it's just a matter of time until somebody gets bingo. None of us are arguing that. But we think that there are better options than a 370-yard driving range to remedy this dangerous situation that exists out there. And I hope that you would be open to some of the suggestions that we might have as to how to mitigate this dangerous situation without taking 300 or 400 yards off the existing golf course.
Yeah, I would encourage all of you, if you want to give details, to email it to us, and we can give it to Andy before we even schedule this next group meeting, just so he has that information. Yeah.
Well,
he's got all the ones we've sent already, but
I would suggest just the opposite.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump in.
Well, there's some people that haven't spoken yet, so maybe just be a little bit patient. Go ahead.
So I'm Anna Swartbager, and I was just wondering that Santa Fe Country Club has this huge net out there that they use on their driving range. And I know it's taller than ours. So has anybody talked to them about their maintenance and what it costs for them to replace that net? And I mean, it's huge net.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it from 599.
Yep.
And I can get over it. On
But-
the side.
On the side. But has anybody talked to them about that?
I have some practical experience with golf courses over my career, and we've used some of those numbers with the new numbers at Andy, and they're pretty close in line.
And then I do have another comment. I was on the original GCAS when all this started way back, and there was a 10 million number thrown out. They talked about taking 18 and making that the driving range, rerouting 17 and 18. Has that even been looked at again?
I would have to look at.
Because it was a very good idea, because you'd be hitting off of grass and not off of mats.
A big conversation that was held with us as we were talking through this. And as Andy alluded to, there's not as many people playing 9 or 18 holes. They want to go whack a club and drink a beer and talk to their friends. Top Golf has really flipped the golf industry on its ear. So thinking through that, we were trying to better align the practice facility driving range with the proximity to the existing restaurant and patio area for entertainment.
So do you plan on lighting it?
That conversation did come up. It'll probably be another phase, but that conversation came up, the conversation about Do we wanna think about wiring it for top tracer technology that, you know, like you can see, like you do on TV when the golfers shoot? So there were conversations about laying the foundation to do that. But again, that was the thinking, just so you kind of know the thinking behind it, so. Right, wrong, or indifferent?
Just real quick, I've got a 10 o'clock meeting, so I need to get going here pretty quick. I just wanted to, if there's anything that I need to just stay here for the next 15 minutes for. Other than that, I'm gonna head over to a meeting. I've got a big event going on this weekend, and the event organizer just drove into town from Gallup, and we got a lot of work to do this afternoon, so, but I didn't want to just walk out. So,
Thanks,
that's
Mike.
cool with everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun.
All right. Oh, yeah.
In the corner and then you. Go ahead. You
I
have
would
one.
just like to know what would be saved with a shorter net. Is there a price per foot?
So my understanding, if you know, refer to the slides, is the 300 and something $1,000 price is because wood poles, which is what we have now, can go up to 90 feet. That's maximum. Above that has to be steel. And so that's why the price jumps so much over 90 feet.
Yeah, $384,450 you quoted for the wooden poles.
And that's almost triple the height that it is now.
Oh, we asked all these questions of Andy too.
Approximately, yeah, I think they're 40 now, and they would go to 90, and then the recommendation is 140.
Yeah, and unfortunately, liability and case law doesn't say, oh, just because you increased it, you're off the hook, and that's the problem. We live in a world where that common sense of just making an improvement doesn't get us off the hook, and that's.
No, I understand that.
Sure. But we'll have the argument with our risk management on, because there's always possibility versus actual probability, and we have that conversation all the time.
And have you talked to the other municipalities that have the same issue? I mean, Santa Fe Country Club that's brought up, right? How are they mitigating it? If they know that you can sneak a ball through somehow.
The ones that I've been involved with, the driving range, because you're building it and you're inviting people to use it. All the risk managers and attorneys I've talked to say that you have a different responsibility than if you're the golfer on the golf course and you shank one. So again, that's the conversation, in every community I've been in has a different tolerance for risk.
So I'm thinking about Andy's presentation, and there appears to be a significant component that's related to revenue and potentially reducing subsidies and all that kind of good stuff. And I would question or challenge what assumptions he made when he was talking about how much money this revised driving range would make, because we are isolated here, and I don't see a lot of people making a long trek to come get a quasi top golf experience in Los Alamos. So I'd be careful about how you
That's a good point. We can answer some financials on that.
We can answer some financials, but I'll also say what I said earlier, and that is staff doesn't have any, or the project didn't have any financial or revenue goals. It was really the safety netting. Andy's throwing that on just from his experience and all that good, but that has never been we don't have a criteria in the project where we have to increase the recoverance of this or that. That's not that wasn't something that staff's measuring or making decisions.
So how much risk mitigation do you need? I mean, you can't be 100% mitigating all of the risk.
Yeah, because in 10 years, we're gonna hit it 50-yard
what is there are also, there are administrative ways you can handle some of this.
It all goes back to, you know, the way you do the study, the way you do the evaluation, the decisions you make, the data's on the table, all comes into play as to whether there was negligence or not. And that's what it comes down to.
And I'll tell you from our standpoint is we start at 100% and we fight backwards. That's where our attorney and our risk management go. Every time it's 100%, and then we have to fight backwards to what's prudent and responsible.
I'm curious how the county looks at risk management currently when the net that exists doesn't protect anybody.
It's a great question, and I think we feel the same way. It's a matter of existing conditions versus when you make an improvement, your responsibilities greatly increase the minute you touch it and you say this is safer or we had to do this, the responsibilities really go up. We have, I mean, we absolutely, as a maintenance item, could just replace the net. We haven't been doing that because we don't want to spend the money on a new net when we know we're making these
Right,
improvements.
but there are a lot of golf courses in the area that,
Yeah.
that must have some standard that you can.
There
use for
isn't,
rig-
there really isn't. You have to look at your, that's why we hire consultants to make recommendations. When it gets argued in a lawsuit, it's all going to be about the expert testimony, the data that was known, was there a known hazard, why should we have known it, and the circumstance that happened. There is not.
But every golf course faces the same risk.
Absolutely.
So they have,
Absolutely.
And again, it goes
and they're
back
not
to,
doing 100% risk mitigation.
And Andy said he's willing to come down to 100. What he's saying is he can't,
he won't sign off.
he
on it.
won't sign off on anything less than that. And that becomes then a conversation, to Corey's point. That's a hard place to be.
So, the area that's to the south of the, access road along, hole number 3, that's kind of been off the plate. I mean, if that were on the plate, then it would be an easy solution. But just put it there. I don't understand why we can't at least look at that as a solution.
Well, it was one of our earlier, it was one
That
of
was
the
the one
early
that-
iterations.
right, it's one that
And
they
the
thought
cost,
was
and
good.
an additional cost was the challenge that we had. And from our standpoint, we had gone through a series of council meetings where there were 4 significant projects that had come back to council that were significantly over budget. The splash pad, the leisure lagoon, the underpass for the trail at Canyon, that we're doing down by the airport. Those all came significantly back over budget, and it was pretty clear to us that council had about this much tolerance for anything coming in over approved budget. And again, that was kind of a driving force.
So that may have changed.
And absolutely. So
It may have changed.
and part of it's that might have changed. It really is about when you, no matter what we do, if we need more budget, we have to go back to council to ask. I would prefer to ask based on this process than when we do the bids. That's when staff, they say, why are you bringing me a bid that, and then also a budget revision and asking for more money. And that's where, if that's where we end up with, there's options that, and some of them request more money and the preferred one requests more money, that we will schedule the council meeting and see what their tolerance is for that. We just don't have that authority as staff to up the budget. And it's just gonna be, but we can do it. We absolutely can do it. All right. Please.
So, message to my fellow golfers. I think what's happened over this last week shows that working together, we're much stronger than working as individuals. And I would actually discourage people from going one-on-one to the county or Andy Staples with your own pet solution, private idea. I'd rather, through LAGA, build a consensus on 1 or 2 or even 3 ideas, and we could vet it amongst ourselves and communicate amongst ourselves, and then present it to Andy and the county. We were highly critical of the county for not communicating with us. I don't want to be self-hypocritical and not communicate with each other. So let's work together before we, start blasting off emails.
That's fine with us. We're happy to get group consensus. We're happy to receive information however you want to deliver.
I think that's more efficient.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, if you have the after meeting, oh my gosh, this was a great idea, or crap, I knew I wanted to say something, but I forgot it. You're gonna have our emails. Please share those thoughts
And you
and
can
comments.
ask us questions too. I mean, that can be questions that as you're thinking about it. And please take some donuts or coffee with you, please.
And if you didn't sign in, please sign in, leave us your email so we can make sure that you're continued part of the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's gotta be some hungry staff in these offices somewhere.
Yeah, we'll get a meeting somehow.
Thank you.
I have never seen
Thank you
donuts
very
go to
much.
waste.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ann, for putting this
Thank you.
meeting together.
We'll do it again soon. Thank you.
So the restrooms up here, is that for both of them, the one on the front and the back, or is that for just one?
You know, the restrooms.
Yeah, by the prices, both of them.
Yeah, I know. It is both of them?
One front, one back.
Okay, because to me, one each just means one instead of.
I think, and really, he summarized those really succinctly because the range redesign also includes the renovation of 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was more than just doing the range. It was a golf course stuff presented in that slide as well.
And then I know they talked about the people were concerned about the trail. Geographically, when we went to